Welcome, everyone. I'm Ann Petrick, Senior Director of Research at Vistage Worldwide. I'm happy to host the latest webinar in our Peak Performer webinar series. This series is designed to support your leadership climb by bringing the most trusted experts to the Vistage community, experts who bring exceptional insight and best practices, helping you navigate new challenges and possibilities. Now, our latest research found that 72% of small and mid-sized businesses are not able to operate at full capacity due to challenges hiring. And retention rates have declined over time, with 29% of CEOs reporting that their retention rates declined in the last year. Now, if you're a leader struggling with your company's ability to attract and retain talent, it might be time to review yourself as an essential element that the best employees and candidates are evaluating as part of their job search. Today, you'll learn the role of the CEO or founder in attracting new talent, how to be a leader that people want to follow, and how to use your mission, purpose, and culture as a hiring advantage. We've invited Amy Ansira, Managing Director of Hire Better, to address this important topic. Amy brings more than 20 years of experience serving in senior leadership roles in executive search, recruitment, process outsourcing, organizational consulting, and strategic talent planning. Amy's well-rounded experience consulting with senior stakeholders in a variety of industries helps Hire Better clients determine their organizational needs while maximizing the client experience and delivering results. Hire Better is on a mission to humanize the recruiting industry. Recognized by Forbes as one of America's best executive recruiting firms, Hire Better helps entrepreneurs scale their organizations with the right talent. As the leading growth matching firm in the nation, Hire Better provides retained executive search, project-based consulting, and strategic talent planning. Certainly a great resource for the 76% of CEOs planning to expand their workforce in the year ahead. Welcome, Amy. So happy to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Ann. I appreciate it. And thank you for welcoming me. I'm really excited to talk to you about this topic. Hiring is personal for founders and CEOs. Sorry, just having a few issues with my forwarding of my slides. Give me just a second. There you go. So what you're going to learn today, you will learn the role of CEOs and founders in talent acquisition, and it's a pretty big one. You will learn how to become a leader that people want to follow. And you will learn how to use your mission and your core values and your culture as a hiring advantage. Those are the three things that we want you to take away from today's presentation. So I'm going to start with a bold statement. It's a revolutionary statement, but it's also an obvious statement. And that is that people are not algorithms. People are not algorithms, but we live in the most technology-enabled world that you can imagine. We live in a world where everything that drives us is technology-enabled. We've got this bad boy right here that usually doesn't leave most of our sides. And we've got our smartwatches that are constantly on our wrists, notifying us of anything that our smartphone has not told us. And we've got a second monitor that tells us how we're sleeping. All of these things, all of these tools and gadgets and technology-enabled vehicles, in ways, they reduce us to an algorithm. They reduce us to a mathematical computation. This one right here calculates my sleep versus recovery. And so I'm 77% of this, but 41% of that. We live in a world of technology. You can clearly see if you go to Amazon, and who doesn't love an Amazon Prime delivery, that you're going to get something the next day. Well, how does Amazon do that? They assess you. They assess your buying habits. They assess what you want and when you want it. And so the next time that you go to order your collagen powder and your vitamins, they know when you're going to do it. And they've got it stocked in a warehouse so that it can make it to you very quickly. If you open up Facebook, what comes at you? Targeted ads for an exercise sock or for jewelry or whatever it might be. But Facebook assesses you, and you are a mathematical computation. And Facebook is pushing information at you based on what it thinks you want to see. And that's based on previous behavior. And then you look at tools like Indeed or other hiring platforms, LinkedIn Recruiter, and those technologies, well, they're assessing you as well. If you or I or anybody submits their resume to a job through Indeed, Indeed puts you through a keyword processing. And it determines based on those keywords and the match, whether or not you go to the top of the list or the bottom of the list. And so technology touches everything that we do, yet we are not algorithms. Now, the world has changed dramatically in the last 2 years. I think everybody can agree that it's changed dramatically. It's probably changed irrevocably. There are a few trends that we know are here to stay: remote work, hybrid work, life balance, work-life balance. Those are trends that are here and they're not going away. At the same time, I think we can all agree that over the past 2 years, and Joe Galvin touched on this last week in Dallas, that over the past 2 years, we are embracing change that we have no knowledge of. Not a single person on the planet has ever navigated business through the lens of a global pandemic. So we're all facing experiences and situations for which we have no background. So we go by gut and we go by instinct. People at the beginning of the pandemic, and I don't know if you saw this, but I saw this of every leader around me. They went from, midline on the, 0 to red line. They were about here. The minute that the pandemic hit, every single person went to red line. And by and large, most people have stayed at red line throughout the past 2 years. And so what you've seen around you is executives that are burning out, people that are dealing with higher levels of depression. We're dealing with higher levels of suicide among teens and young people. There are unprecedented life experiences that we're all going through at the same time. And I think that what that pushes to, and what we've seen over the past 2 years, is that people went from having a job to overnight assessing their lives and assessing, what do I want? What matters to me? What do I want in my home life? What do I want in my marriage? What do I want my family to be about? But also, what do I want for the work that I do? And by and large, it became less about money, and it became more about meaning and purpose and depth. It became about coaching and training and opportunities for advancement and growth. And it became about working for an inspiring leader and an inspiring team and alignment with team. The Great Resignation is fully on us. We are in the midst of it. We've got 2 decades of Labor Department data that is completely out the window in terms of quit rates, because they have been increasing month over month since last year, and they show no signs of stopping. And what we're seeing is that people are not leaving for money. They're leaving for those bigger purposes, those bigger things. So again, people are not algorithms. People are looking for more depth in their lives. So we believe that the future of business is human to human, and that in order to grow an impactful business, CEOs and leaders must take a people-first approach. In this world of technology and rampant technology, which quite frankly has saved us, it has saved us in a million ways, because our work would have come to a screeching halt were it not for Zoom and being able to connect in through Wi-Fi. But in order to grow a business impactfully, leaders must take a people-first approach to entrepreneurship, to the way that they lead, and to the way that they approach talent. Now, what does this mean? This means that leaders must put people first in their decision-making, and they must walk the talk. Now, I want to tell you a story about a leader that we work with, and we started working with him about 6 months before COVID started. His name is Andy, and he's probably one of the most talented people I've ever met. High IQ, able to process data sets in an unprecedented way, but also one of the most high EQ people that I've ever met. I met him as he was taking over leadership for a company. And it was a company that was founded by a friend of his, an engineer, and it was an air filtration company. Now, the founder, admittedly, very self-admittedly, he said he was an authoritarian in the way that he managed his people. And he had to step out of the business for a health issue. And so he brought Andy in to help lead the company. Andy, being high IQ, high EQ, he came in and he really assessed what was going on. He said, this company is broken. And it wasn't that they had a broken product. In fact, they had a great product, a great suite of products that were in high demand. So their product development wasn't broken. Their engineering wasn't broken. Their sales function wasn't broken. But what was broken about the company was the culture. And it's because the previous leader had been more authoritarian and had not really taken the time to dig into what are we doing? At the core of our being as a company, what is it that we're trying to achieve? And what is our mission? What is our vision? What are we driving towards? And what are the core values? What is it that we believe in deeply, deeply, that drives our business forward and aligns everybody on the team? And so he took a step back and he spent probably the first 90 to 120 days really getting his arms around that. It was less about the product and all of those things. It was really more about the people. And so he helped define alongside his people the mission and the vision for what they were trying to achieve. And he helped define the core values. And those core values were defined by looking at the people around him and seeing what behaviors they exhibited over and over and over that could form the basis for their core values, such that their core values were no longer words on a wall, but they were really principles that the company lived and breathed day in and day out. And what happened was the people that really aligned with that core values, they were passionately involved. The people that were not aligned, they exited. And that's okay. That's what you want when you have a clearly defined set of core values and a mission and a vision. But what that translated to when COVID hit was pretty dramatic. Now, this company, as I said, they were air filtration systems. So they were a product that was in huge demand. But at the same time, they were facing some real challenges. And those challenges tied to, supply chain. Their product was made in China. And so they were facing issues around supply chain. They were facing issues around shipping. There were a lot of things that were dynamic within their environment that could have been easily destructive to the company. But it's the way that Andy led and the way that Andy involved his team that really made the difference. Andy had a saying, and his saying, and it's still my favorite saying to this day, it was back the truck up. And he literally would back the truck up to the warehouse. I'm gonna get a little emotional here, sorry. He would back the truck up and he would load it with air filters. And he would drive those air filters to hospitals and to schools and to churches and to anybody in the community that needed better air, because they were people that were dealing with what we all dealt with in the beginning, COVID. It was really, really tough. And he recognized that he and his team could make a difference. And they did this free of charge. Yes, they sold air filters as well, but they donated a huge amount of their product to their community because they knew it mattered. And because it was indicative of their core values. It was how they lived and breathed. So much so that he had people coming in the evenings and in weekends to literally rip apart their filters and pull the HEPA material out so that they could make masks to provide to first responders who didn't have access to personal protection equipment. This is in the early days of COVID. And some of us were sewing face masks out of cloth so that we could put the HEPA filter in there to send to first responders. So Alan and Andy and the way that they engaged with their community, it was really about walking the talk. It was about taking that people first approach, and it was people first for their team, but it was also people first in the community. So it's interesting that as we've talked about the fact that people aren't moving for money. People are moving for meaning, and they're moving for purpose, and they're moving for belonging, and they're moving for leadership. But what most of us have done, and this data has not changed since probably mid last year. I think we cited something similar to this in October. Most of us, when asked what we're doing in response to hiring challenges, most of us are raising wages, despite the fact that we know that money is not what is motivating decision-making right now. Money is a nice to have, and certainly we all need a paycheck, but we can get a paycheck anywhere. What motivates people is meaning and purpose and belonging. And raising wages is kind of like pushing the easy button. You know, on TV where they have the Staples commercial where they say pushing the easy button, raising wages is kind of like the easy button. But really, what drives human to human is not raising wages. So I want to talk about growth matching. Growth matching is our philosophy for human to human, and it's something that we have developed over a period of years with our clients. And what we've seen of individuals that engage in growth matching is they are what we call dynamic disruptors. Now, what does that mean? That's a nice catchphrase, but what it means is that they are leaders who are driven, and they're collaborative, and they're expansive thinkers, much like Andy, who I cited earlier. People who think outside of the box, and they really understand that they have to take a people first approach to the way that they assess business. Companies that we work with that engage in growth matching, they have higher rates of growth that are more sustained. So what does this mean? Growing and scaling with a people first approach is about aligning your talent strategy with your business growth. And I want to spend a little bit of time on this because it is a pretty critical area that we've seen success from. It's taking that step back and looking at my business and understanding where am I at now and where do I want to be in 18 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the time frame is. Taking into account what are the current market realities and really understanding where do I want to go and where are the gaps on my team. What positions do I feel, what people do I feel can achieve that growth pattern, and where am I missing? And it's about implementing a humanized recruiting process as a part of that. So stepping back, assessing your teams, identifying gaps, and then moving forward with a humanized approach. I worked with a really interesting client. I met Justin probably, I'm going to say 6 or 7 years ago in Los Angeles at a conference. He had founded a highly successful niche insurance business. He'd founded it with a friend, and they started off in a garage. It was just the two of them. And over a period of 20 plus years, they grew that business to a $30 million company. They owned some impressive real estate, office space, and they seemingly were doing well. But when I met Justin, he was really, he was frustrated, and he was angry because he couldn't identify the kind of talent that he needed to grow. And his growth objectives were pretty significant. He wanted to grow from about $30 million to $100 million over a period of 3 to 5 years, which is, as most of you will recognize, fairly aggressive. But he was really stymied when it came to people and finding the right people. And so we engaged in this process with him of taking that step back and looking at where am I now and where do I want to be? And how do I approach the talent that I have? What are the people that are here that are aligned with my core values? And they had done the work. They'd really looked at their core values, mission, and vision. So they had it all outlined. But understanding how to grow and how to align a strategy with that was aligned with their business growth around talent was really critical. And they were able to, over a period of, say, 2 years, hire the next level of talent that they needed to grow the business and scale the business because they took this step back. They were not reactive anymore. They were strategic about how they approached talent. And they did it with a humanized recruiting approach. And so here is where we get into, I think, more of the meat of what we want to talk about today. The first thing I want to talk to you about is the role of leadership in attracting talent. And really the concept of what a leader is versus what a leader used to be. A leader used to be the person that maintained profitability and drove strategy. And that's still true. Those talents and those skill sets are still involved. But in the world as it's changed over the past 2 years, it's requiring more of us. The leader of a company is the single biggest factor in the employee brand. It is the person that drives brand, and it starts from the top down. The CEO is the company evangelist. They are the person who communicates to the world, this is what we do, this is why we do it, and this is how we do it. The evangelist of the company, they are the ones that are excited and passionate, and they are communicating what it is we do to everybody in the ecosystem, whether it be team members or customers, partners. The leader is the evangelist of the brand. At the same time, we're working with people that are stressed, I guess is the best way to put it. We're all in a different place in our lives, and we're all individuals, and we all require a different level of interaction, specifically coaching. And so you might have somebody that's earlier in their career versus late in their career, and based on that individual, they're going to need different levels of coaching and mentorship. And so the leader of today must also be a coach. They must recognize when somebody needs additional help, but then they also need to celebrate their team's strengths, meaning they're a cheerleader. They're the ones that are recognizing above and beyond behavior and calling it out to the team. They're a therapist. Again, we're dealing with new and unprecedented challenges. And so the role of a leader now is a little bit therapist as well. And not all of us are going to have the answers. We heard this last week and it was fascinating. You might not know what the answer is for one of your teammates, but you certainly, as a leader, it's incumbent upon you to try to find out how to help your teammates and how to help them get past whatever it is they're dealing with. And then lastly, it's about being a negotiator. Again, we're in the midst of the Great Resignation. And so there's a little bit of negotiation that's going to go on with both your current teammates, incoming teammates, as well as outgoing teammates. I want to tell another story, and this is one of my favorites. It's about a young man named Matthias, and Matthias, he owns a company that is, well, now it's a global company, but when we first started interacting with him, it was a pretty small mom and pop Austin shop. And they're a children's bike manufacturer and distributor. Matthias has been growing this organization for a long time, but he very early on understood the importance of culture and passion and mission. And one of the things that his company embraces is the concept of getting children to be passionate and excited about riding their bikes. When COVID hit, what he did was nothing short of remarkable in my eyes. I was able to witness it and watch it and see what he did. He was able to marry the deeper meaning of COVID and children's bikes. If you have kids and you think back to when COVID first hit, probably the most benign, the most innocent thing that a kid could do, knowing that they couldn't go to school, they couldn't play with their friends, they couldn't go out on the playground. There were all these, normalities they couldn't engage in, but they could get on a bike. And Matthias recognized this. And so over the past 2 years, he's been on a mission almost to put bikes in the hands of kids. One of the first things that he did was donate bikes to kids of first responders. So children that didn't have access to bikes, he was putting them in their hands. Over the past year, he has donated over 1,000 bikes to different organizations. And the thing that's so interesting is because they have outlined that passion for giving back and that passion for community, that people they showed up, they engaged. People were watching him, and he was the face of the brand. He's still the face of the brand. But then likewise, you had leaders at the same time that were not living the brand in the way that we would want them to. So I know at the time there were several airlines that had taken some money from the government in the form of support. And then they were laying off and taking raises, laying people off who needed jobs, and then increasing their own salaries. So it's the way in which you interact with the world that defines your brand, and people are watching. So this role of evangelist, coach, cheerleader, therapist, negotiator, these are the ways in which we can attract talent, by living our mission and evangelizing it to the world. So how do you become a leader that people want to follow? What we've seen over the past couple of years, maybe a little bit longer than that, is a real shift in worker dynamics. And the old mantra used to be never complain, never explain, right? You just got it done. Well, Gen Z says that's not enough. And what they're looking for is authenticity. A couple of recent studies cited some very interesting information to me. And this goes back to personalization, and it goes back to being your true self. 72% of Gen Z employees want a manager that makes time to develop and maintain relationships. And 64% said that it's important that managers openly share unique aspects of themselves with the team. That's a pretty stark difference when you think about yesterday's leader. Yesterday's leader, when we talk about that concept of authenticity, typically had a layer of filters on, right? They had a mask that they wore, and it was that this is my professional mask that I'm going to present to the world because I think this is what you want to see. But what we're hearing is that's not resonating with the employee of today or the employee of tomorrow. Those people want leaders that are passionate, that are inspirational, that they are real. We want realness in today's world. One of the things I think of as the most beneficial results of COVID, and I know I've heard this and talked to a lot of people about this, is that overnight we went from this professional persona that we presented to the world to seeing into the living rooms or offices or bedrooms or laundry rooms, wherever you make your office. We all of a sudden overnight got to see into that. And we got to see the true person. We got to see the mess behind them. We got to see their dog running through the living room as the FedEx guy came. We got to see kids running through at the end of the school day and see our coworkers' friends. So it's important to note how much this concept of authenticity bleeds into the leader of today and a leader that people want to follow. People want a leader who is emotionally intelligent and engages in empathy. Meaning, how do I make my team members' lives easier? Physically, mentally, and emotionally. So when we talk about these concepts of personalization and inspiration and passion, authenticity and purpose, and engagement and motivation, this is about being somebody who is real and engaging with your team in a completely way than you ever have before. One of the other things I want to talk about, and I think it's one of the most insightful things that I've heard that leaders are doing in response to the Great Resignation, and that is the concept of a stay interview. We've all heard about exit interviews. By the time somebody gets to an exit interview, it's too late. They are gone, they're disengaged. They're going to give you feedback, and it's probably going to be negative feedback. But what about the concept of a stay interview? What if you were the kind of leader that was so engaged and so focused on your people that you took the time to personalize and to talk to each one of your employees, especially those employees that are your top performers, and understand, rather than assume what they want, what is it that they love about their job? What is it that is fulfilling for them? If they were to leave, why would they leave? Would they leave for a promotion? Would they leave for career advancement? What are the things that they're looking for? Because the reality of the fact that is that what we call enthusiastic stayers, people who want to be there, that makes up about 30% of most companies. And if you're missing the boat in talking to those people, you're missing an opportunity. So becoming a leader people want to follow is about this personalized experience where you are bringing your emotional intelligence to the table and engaging in empathetic conversations to motivate and to drive purpose. Apologies, I'm having a slide issue again. There we go. So the last one is around using your mission and your purpose and your values as a hiring advantage. I'm going to spend a little more time on this one because I truly believe that that concept of mission and vision and core values is foundational to hiring. It's foundational to every company. It should be foundational to every company. And it's hard because we talked earlier about 78% of us raising wages because that's the easy button. Well, to some degree, the mission, vision, core values, that's like the medium hard button in some ways. It takes work and it takes time. If you are in the day-to-day of running the business and you're building the plane while you're flying it, you might not think about the role that core values has. But in today's environment, where people want more meaning and more purpose in what they do, that mission and the vision and the core values is really foundational to your company. And it really is your North Star. It should be the guiding light to everything that you do in hiring, in firing, in training and coaching. It should be your guiding light in how you interact with the world, how you present yourselves to the world, what you do in the community, and the types of people that you work with. And so the companies that take that step back and really understand mission, vision, and core values, those are the ones that tend to be more successful. And I want to dispel a myth that core values always starts at the top. I think that as the leader, you are the evangelist of those core values, but I think that those core values are distilled from the people around you, meaning take the time to go through the exercise to look at each of the people on your team and the behaviors that they engage in and how those reflect what you do and how you do it. And by looking at those behaviors, you will be able to distill what your core values are. And then once you have them, you are the evangelist of them, but the rest of your team becomes the evangelist as well. I know we've all probably known companies that have hired for a resume only and haven't assessed the core values part. A resume is very important. What we're seeing is that Gen Z leaders of tomorrow, when polled, they think that skills and degree are less important than what your personal makeup is. So there's going to be a shift away from hiring for resume. But what we've seen of companies who have hired for resume only and not included core values as part of the discussion is that they have what we call a bad apple syndrome. They're going to hire somebody who's not in congruence with their core values or doesn't communicate in the way that makes sense for their team and their company. And that person becomes toxic and they stick out like a sore thumb. They might have all the skills in the world, but if they don't meet the core values, they're not a match for the company. Personalization is another one of those that I think is hypercritical to how you use your mission and your vision and your values. So when you think about this, everybody shows up differently. What works for a mom of 4 versus a single guy with 2 dogs is completely different. And so we need to meet people where they are, and we need to understand that different people need different things. The mom of 4 might need a little bit more grace at the end of the day because she's got kids that have come home from school. And the young man who's only got a couple of dogs and he's early in his career, well, he might need more training or more coaching. He might need mentorship. He might need access to classes so that he can up-level his game. And so meeting people where they are and understanding that everybody is different is a big piece of how you can hire and bring on the right people. Relationship nurturing. I think it's important, again, as we talked about empathy, that as leaders, we create trust and open dialogue and a spirit of transparency. One of the ways that I've seen this done in the most effective way that really the team members were so excited about, and they kind of bragged about a little bit, honestly, was really simple. It wasn't anything complex. It wasn't anything overly dramatic. It was as simple as picking up the phone and making a phone call. This leader would be on the road. He'd have a couple of hours in the car and he'd just pick up the phone and start calling team members. How are you doing? Is everything okay? What's going on, with your wedding that's upcoming? How is Johnny's, soccer season going so far? It was the little touches that meant the most. And suddenly people feel like they're no longer just another number. They're no longer just an employee, but they matter to you. Another one that I've seen, which I think is amazing, is the power of a card. I mean, think about how easy and how simple it is to recognize somebody for outstanding behavior. And so from time to time, recognizing that somebody's done something that's above and beyond and writing them a card and sending it to their house. Who doesn't love mail? In this world of digital everything and emails and texts and Slacks and Zooms, that personal touch, it matters, and relationship nurturing matters. And then lastly, waterfall leadership. Waterfall leadership is very much tied to mission and vision and values. And what I mean by waterfall leadership is that as a leader, you have identified and you are the evangelist for your core values, your mission, and your vision. Ideally, you have surrounded yourself with individuals that are in alignment with you. So you've got a CFO, a COO, a chief revenue officer, whatever it may be, that are surrounding you. They're your core, your inner circle. You're in the foxhole together. And they understand what it is you're trying to achieve, and vice versa. So ideally, they're going to go and they're going to hire the next level down, the people that report to them, their VPs or directors, and they're going to hire according to the same standards of core values, mission, and vision. And so then you've got the next level of leadership that's in alignment. And then they hire the next leader in alignment. So in an ideal world, if you're using your core values and your mission and your vision, and you're hiring to those, it goes from level to level to level. And that's your hiring advantage because you're using your mission, your purpose, and your values as a hiring tool. Likewise, you're using it as a firing tool, and you're using it as a tool by which to repel people who are not the right fit. So what we want to talk about right now is around taking action. Because we can talk to you about all of these concepts, we can share these concepts with you, but at the end of the day, if we don't take action and if we don't do something about it, then it's just words. Again, we're in a new world that many of us are not equipped to navigate, or we are learning to navigate actively, right? We're learning lessons on the fly and integrating them. But a lot of us don't have this previous experience. And so the ability to play to your strengths, to really look inward and understand, what qualities do I possess? What qualities do I need to work on? That's critical. The wonder of Vistage is that it provides all of you, all of us, the opportunity to maximize our experience, meaning that we've got a network of fellow leaders that are built differently. So where your strengths might lie, somebody else might have other strengths, and you can utilize your network in order to play to the strengths that you have and then build new strengths. So playing to your strengths and building new strengths, that's one of the ways that you can take action immediately. The second is around walking the talk. It's not enough to do the work of understanding what your mission and your vision and your core values are if you're not living them. As the leader, you're the exemplar. You are the person that is guiding and evangelizing to everybody in the world. So if you walk the talk, everything else will follow. And then lastly, it's about using those core values to repel as much as you attract. We talked about this a little bit earlier. You want the right people on the bus with you. And conversely, you want the people who are not engaged, who are not focused, who don't align with you. You don't want them with you. So repel as much as you attract by being faithful to your core values and understanding them deeply. So again, we believe that people are not algorithms. I think it would be helpful if we would each take a moment to reflect on everything that's been covered today and really discern what part of it hit home for most of the areas that need improvement. What is it that you most need to work on? It's midway through the day on Friday. So we've got a weekend coming up. We have a weekend during which we can reflect and we can come up with an action plan that we can implement on Monday. It doesn't matter how big it is. It doesn't matter how small it is. But at the end of the day, we have to do something more than hitting the easy button. And so that's my challenge to you all, is to reflect on what you've learned and to figure out what it is that you can implement on Monday to start making a difference. So with that, I think we'll move to Q&A. I wanted to just point out before we start taking questions that if anybody's interested in continuing the conversation, meaning you have questions, you have concerns, you want to dive deeper into any of these topics, we've got an email address, vistage@higherbetter.com, that you can send any emails to, and we will schedule time to visit with you in more detail. And with that, I'm going to take my screen sharing off and we can move to Q&A.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Amy. You covered a lot of great things, and everyone can start submitting questions. But the first one I think is fantastic, and that's how often should we review our mission and core values to possibly change them? Should they be fluid or should they be foundational and really solid? What's your advice?
Yeah, that's a great, I'm going to take a sip of water real quick.
Yes.
That's a great question. So what we've seen, your core values should primarily stay the same. It shouldn't be that they change month over month or year over year. They should be your guiding lights. They should be your North Star. But I do believe that it's helpful to revisit them. What we've seen as a best practice is typically annually going back and really taking a deep dive and looking at it and assessing, do these still feel authentic? Does this still feel like what we want to do and how we want to do it? I think that your mission typically should stay pretty static. Sometimes vision can change, and that just depends on where you're trying to lead the organization. So, but I do suggest probably at least annually.
Okay. Next question is looking for tools to bridge the core values with field personnel. So really, I with some of the experts we've talked to, it's really defining what are the behaviors that demonstrate those core values. So what's some guidance around that? Yeah,
and it's interesting because this is also a question that came up last week when we were in Dallas. I think that there are a lot of companies in particular that have either field personnel or that have, what we might call more, I guess, skilled workers is what Joe called it, but what we would ordinarily refer to as more blue collar, that it's a little bit harder to bridge that. And so what I've seen that's been really successful, again, it goes back to the behaviors that you're exhibiting, behaviors that your team members are exhibiting. core values are wonderful. They cannot be just words on a wall. If they're words on a wall, they don't resonate. When I was at a seminar a couple of weeks ago, I did a show of hands. I said, tell me how many of you here, there was about 10 people in the room, said, how many of you here have defined core values? And about half the hands went up. And I said, how many of you can name more than 2 of them? And half the number of hands went up. And the last question was, how many of you celebrate your core values? Meaning you see behavior exhibited and you talk about it. You celebrate it, and no hands went up. And so I think that's the big disconnect that most companies have, is they put them on as words on a wall, but they don't live them. So if you're trying to reach those field personnel, if you're seeing like one of your core values is go above and beyond, and you see somebody who works extra hours or whatever the case may be, celebrate that behavior, but celebrate it organization wide. So you're blasting it out to everybody. And everybody knows, oh, wow, that is a core value. And Joe, he just did that. That was amazing. That's a good one.
Yeah, that's great. So yeah, that was a follow-up question I had is, if someone's thinking about a rewards program to reward people caught living some of those core values to reinforce that, how have you seen companies do that?
In a number of different ways. We have one client that has a quarterly award that they will provide, and it's something that is voted on by the entire employee population. And so if we say our core values are these 5 values, who have you seen organization wide that has exhibited those core values this quarter? And then it's a silly award. It's not even it's almost like a toy, but it's a coveted kind of a toy that people get. Other ways I've seen it celebrated are, in the old days, it was more monetary gifts, like you would see a gift card or something like that. I think that resonates less for people now. And so I think that that it's more in the vein of, celebrating via those types of awards is what I've seen that's worked really well. One of my clients had for some team members, they had a pink pig that was a blow up. I know it sounds totally strange, but they had a pink blow up pig that they got to hang over their office door, and it traded every month, but whoever had the pink pig they won. It was a coveted award to have the pink floating pig. So it can be everything from serious to silly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how do you do that in a hybrid or remote environment for our members who are still in some level of hybrid or remote?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I think that what we've seen that seems to, and I know we're all in this place of Zoom burnout, where we're like, not another Zoom meeting, but we've seen a lot of those, kinds of celebrations via Zoom that are more ad hoc, where people celebrate each other. I think that as we start to come online and be a little bit more in person, some of that will get easier. But that's certainly a challenge. I think the other thing too is going back to the personalization piece of it. If we can't be physically in person, then it's sending people things that I know a lot of what I've seen from managers has been in the form of sending special gifts and being thoughtful about what that individual would like to celebrate behaviors as well. So.
Okay. Well, that's a great segue to my next question. Joe, our Chief Research Officer, and I were working on some of our next reports and really thinking about the role of the CEO, leadership, and frontline leaders in how you translate those core values into behaviors. Where in that spectrum is the responsibility for translating values into behaviors for a specific position?
We talked about this a little bit. I think that the CEO is the evangelist, but I think it comes from the people. It can't be tops down. And I've heard this complaint from many leaders they've maybe made a best places to work or something like that. It's the leader that gets celebrated, and leaders who are thinking about it the right way say, it's not me that should be being celebrated, it's my team that should be being celebrated. Mm-hmm. And so I think that it comes from the core of your team and should be something that they filter up in terms of what is it that we believe. But is your question is who communicates that? Is that what your question was?
Yeah, how does it, if it's go above and beyond, it's like who defines that in this role, going above and beyond looks like this?
Right. And so you're saying, is it more of like a metrics tied type of a thing?
Yeah, is it metrics? Is it, performance expectations? Does that fall down to the frontline manager to say, hey, for my team, going above and beyond means responding to customer service questions within 24 hours, or like you
Right.
mentioned, working extra hours. Who
Yeah.
defines what that is?
It's interesting because where I've seen it work the best, it's defined by the team. So meaning
Oh,
if we're working on a project and I see this is where it's worked the best, and I see somebody that I've worked with that is putting in the extra hours and has gone then calling out that behavior. I think it's more authentic when it comes from peers or people who know what the situation is, if that makes sense. And then leaders can pile on and say, oh, great job. But sometimes I think, especially as we get larger, when we are organizations of 5 to 25, it's very easy for a leader to touch each individual. But as we grow and become more complex organizations, that's why that concept of waterfall leadership is so important, because it's no longer going to be the CEO that's calling out every individual. It's going to happen at more of the waterfall level.
okay, interesting. Yeah, because I thought that was interesting. You talked about the bottom up approach for the core values and looking to the team to see what they were. And that seems somewhat counterintuitive, but is it ever possible that the bad apples would skew those values and that create that misalignment between the purpose and values?
It's interesting because in the organizations that I've seen where core values are defined, the bad apples don't necessarily last, if that makes sense. Meaning that the core values kind of manage them out. Not kind of manage them out. The core values manage them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if there's someone who doesn't have the foundations, you talk about those mission, purpose, core values, what's the first step to get started?
I think the first step to get started, and where I've seen it most successful, is it might be CEO, but it's a cross reference of the team. So it might be different people that are in different roles at different levels that come together and share stories. And it's an iterative process, meaning that you might have, this might happen over a period of months where you come together and say, what is it that we feel like we were put here to do? And it can be around, client experience. It can be around how we interact with the community. It can be a million different things, and it's going to be different for every single company. But coming together and really thinking about what is the higher purpose of what we do, and then iterating on that and trying to distill it into one thing that resonates and feels like it is meaningful for all of the participants in that session. And then, you're doing that across mission, you're doing that with vision, you're doing that with core values, but it's really, it's typically storytelling and behavior based is where I've seen that be the most successful. That makes sense.
I think that's interesting. I was talking to someone who is in the insurance business, and they're talking about their values or purpose and saying, well, it's not really kind of a, that exciting of an industry to work in. And I thought immediately, well, you are working on helping people protect what they've worked hard for, right? That's a purpose.
Yeah.
So I think when you think of something in the most transactional way, you can still ramp that up to something that people can really feel proud to be behind.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think sometimes companies sometimes we don't really look at the true value of what we provide, and we look at it, like you said, in this very transactional way. But if you really think about how you're interacting with your customers or how you're interacting with your community, I think we can all find a deeper meaning to what we do, even if it's selling insurance or, making a widget. If that widget at the end of the day helps somebody, then connecting to that, how you help individuals and how you change the world that's kind of what all of that is about in my mind.
Right. Your part in the end result of what happens. Yeah, fascinating. Okay, one last question for you. So of the 5 roles you talked about for a leader, evangelist, coach, therapist, cheerleader, negotiator, which one do you find that leaders struggle with the most?
That's a good question. I think that probably what I think I've seen over the past couple of years that people have struggled with the most is the therapist one. And it's because we're not all geared to be therapists, and that, you know, and to take our business hat off and put our listening ears on and really understand what people are going through. But I think also at the same time, it's not as though leaders are immune to what's going on right now. If anything, the challenges of the environment are amplified for a leader, because they have all of the stress of, am I going to make payroll? Can I keep the business afloat? Do I need to lay people off? I've got supply chain issues, you know, whatever, you know, people are leaving at you know, rapid rates, all of those things they're dealing with. And so I think taking the time to listen to other people when you're really truly stressed as well, that's hard. That's a hard one. So, and I think the other thing is that as leaders, we want to have all the answers, and we don't have all the answers. And so that's a really daunting thing, to have somebody come to you and confide in you and to go, I don't know how to help you. So that's an uncomfortable position to be in.
Yeah, well, I think that gets to the authenticity, right? Is to be say, you know, I don't have the answer now, but still stay in constant communication with what you do know. I think we saw that be really important through the pandemic.
Yeah, it was interesting because also referencing back to Dallas last week, Mike Foster, who was, I think, our keynote, he talked about that you might not know the answer, but your job as the leader is go find somebody who does. So if one of your employees is dealing with, you know, somebody that's got suicidal thoughts or something like that, putting them in touch, you're not a suicide prevention specialist, but you can go find somebody to put them in touch with and be that trusted resource that helps them in a way that nobody else can. So,
yeah. Well, and I think that's a great way to actually demonstrate and prove some of those values of the leader that somebody wants to get behind and follow.
Yeah, 100%.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Amy. Very much appreciate having you here.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, for our attendees, we'll be sending a link to today's recording and the slides within 24 hours. And we welcome you to join us for more of our upcoming webinars, including next Friday, March 4th, COVID-19, What is Next for Businesses? And that's with Dr. Paul Auerter. He's joined us several times through the pandemic. He's the clinical director of the Division of Infectious Diseases at Johns Hopkins. Then on Friday, March 11th, we present Establishing a Learning Culture as a Competitive Advantage with Chris Brennan from Insperity. And finally, on Friday, March 18th, big month in March, join us for Gender Equity is Everyone's Business with Alyssa Sangster and Amy Orlov of the Forte Foundation. So some great webinars coming up, and you can find more information and register for those at vistage.com/webinar. That's vistage.com/webinar. Also, please plan to join us for our next virtual conference, The CEO's Journey, People and Culture, on Friday, March 25th. And more information on that event, national conference, is available at vistage.com/peopleculture. vistage.com/peopleculture, all one word. So I hope you join us for one of those upcoming events. Thank you for your time today. Be safe and be well.